Hello, this is Carl Irwin with another Blender tutorial, and this is kind of a special Blender tutorial because it's going to be the first in a series of tutorials in the series that I'm calling Hacking the Viewport. And what we're going to be looking at is OpenGL rendering sort of in a systematic way. We're going to be looking at various uses for the viewport render options using OpenGL and GLSL rendering that will provide us with some very extensive and perhaps unthought of capabilities and effects that one would perhaps feel is only possible in a render engine, a ray-traced render engine. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to utilize the viewport actually as a compositing location, a compositing medium, a place where we can composite together two-dimensional images as well as three-dimensional objects. So in this first installment of the series, we're just going to look at a few general things. Now, for some of you who already have some knowledge and understanding about the OpenGL and GLSL capabilities of the viewport, this may be the only part in the series that you even need to look at. You'll probably get a number of things answered right now. However, I promise you that if you hang in there and you watch each part of the series, and I'm not sure how many parts are going to be, but if you watch each part, you will probably learn a great number of things that you can apply in lots of different projects, not only in this project that we're going to look at here. So first, let me just show you what the original project is. This is the video that was posted. You can see this playing back. We have kind of this planet sort of looking sphere here, and you can see these asteroids. There's kind of an asteroid field here. Also interesting in the scene, you can see that there's kind of this nebula, smoky kind of figure, and it is a three-dimensional figure. You can see that as the camera moves through space, that this nebula kind of material is closing distance from foreground to background. Also, you'll see in here a number of other effects. There's this big lens flare going on here, and there's different parts of the lens flare. There's a little bit of an illuminated grit on the lens with kind of this bokeh blur going on there as well. You'll see that there's a star field in the background. So this three-dimensional star field that actually has depth to it. The stars are actually moving in logical three-dimensional space as the camera closes in. And you see lots of different lighting and shadow kinds of effects going on in here that you wouldn't think would be possible using OpenGL, but they are possible. We're going to look at how this is done. So these are all the things, and the one thing that I want to point out is that everything that you see is in one single scene and is not composited separately. Everything is all in one place in one scene. Nothing has been layered out and then layered in a compositor, separate compositor, either the video sequence editor or the internal compositor. Everything is all together in one location, which is quite a task, and we're going to look at how that can be done. So let's quickly take a look at the scene. Now, some of you were a little skeptical when I posted this original video, wanted to see the actual viewport view of this because he was skeptical that it could actually be done without any kind of compositing. But you can see here that in this scene, all the things that you saw in the video are present. Everything that was there is here right now. A couple of other things to point out. You can see that there's even kind of this little atmosphere halo that seems to be around this planet kind of object. So really interesting things. A lot of transparency going on. And those of you who have used OpenGL or any of the game engine material settings, you know how difficult transparency can be unless you're actually in the game engine player, which we are not going to be using. We're going to be using the viewport only in GLSL shading. you know what these limitations can be, and this might be a little astonishing to you how this is all done. And that's kind of what we're going to look at here. So let me just play this in real time just to prove the point. So it's playing back. It's kind of slow because it is rendering quite a bit here, but still it is essentially in real time, frame by frame, and we can see everything here within the scene playing back. And just to again prove the concept further, we'll stop right here and I'll render one single frame. So if I click on the render button here, and a couple seconds later we should have a full frame, and you can see this is exactly what we were looking at in the viewport. So this is a OpenGL GLSL rendered image directly from the viewport, and with all these effects in their full glory. So you will notice on the final video that there were a few other things that are not accounted for in the viewport. Recognize that some of the things that we're going to have to deal with in the viewport really cannot be accomplished. There are some hard limitations, and the goal here is not to necessarily find a way to accomplish absolutely every single desired effect, but to accomplish the vast majority of desired effects, to limit the amount of post-processing that needs to be done in our renders. So if we can put the maximum amount of materials and textures into one scene, we can speed up our rendering time and our post-processing. And that's the goal. That the more that we can get all within a scene, the better off we are and the less time is spent. Now, before we jump into this and look at some of these objects in here and kind of discuss the limitations and also really what hacking is, let me talk real quick about hacking for a second here. And while I do this, I'll kind of move around the scene so you can sort of get an idea of how this works. When we hear the term hacking, we think about computers and coding and that kind of thing. We think about gaining access into something without authorization. That is a very limited use of the term. The term hacking, in its more general use, means to work around the limitations of something. It also means, kind of the B definition, to extend the capabilities of something. So, and those two things kind of mean the same thing at the same time. So, to work around limitations and also to extend the capabilities. So, when I'm talking about hacking the viewport, we're going to be looking at the limitations, identifying what they are. And once we identify what they are, we can work around them. And also extending the capability beyond what it perhaps was intended to do. We're going to try to do that as well. So now I just wanted to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page with what I'm talking about with hacking the viewport. We're going to be doing some things that are unorthodox, and I know that they're unorthodox, and they may not intended to be that way. But that is the essence of hacking. So let me talk about some limitations here. Okay, so the first part of this definition is to overcome limitations. So we first need to identify what the limitations are. So here's a list quickly of some of the limitations. First thing, lighting, shadows, and ambient occlusion in the viewport. So we have a problem with lighting in the viewport. And if any of you have ever played around with the game engine and the lighting in OpenGL, you know that the lights all work differently, and they do not work in a ray-traced fashion, meaning that some lights cast shadows, some lights do not. Some lights cast shadows only on the object on which the shadows only exist on the same object from which they are cast, right? And they do not cast shadows onto other objects when you're using certain lights, like a point light. So point light will only cast shadow on the object itself, but it will not cast shadow from one object to another. Spotlights and a sun lamp, on the other hand, will cast shadow from one object to another, but it's always a hard shadow. It's never a soft shadow. So we can't get soft shadows, really. So we're going to have to find a way to get around that. That is a limitation that we are stuck with, and we'll have to find a way to deal with that. Okay. The next thing that's a problem in there is ambient occlusion. There is no ambient occlusion. We have to find a way to get around that as well. So as you're looking at this planet here, and it looks like there's some sort of ambient occlusion shadow going on in the crevices, that has to be generated and faked in some way. So we're going to have to find a way to do that. Other things, volumetrics in OpenGL. There really are no volumetrics in OpenGL. Now, there is a way to do mist and Z-depth kind of effects. The game engine and the GLSL OpenGL engine has a way to fake mist. And what it's doing is the mist settings are really just changing the color of objects to match a background distant color. So it would appear, because the color is changing on the object, on the material, that it is moving back into some sort of atmospheric effect, into an atmosphere of mist. And that is, in and of itself, kind of a hack. It's kind of a fake. There's other ways to do that using textures, and we may look at that. That is not being utilized in this scene, but we may find ways to do that. You can also do smoke simulations in OpenGL, but it's quite limited in its output. So we're going to have to find a way to make volumetrics, light rays, and so on, things like that. You can see we have sort of an example of volumetrics right here with this nebula, and it appears to be a volumetric effect, but it is not. It's actually a two-dimensional compositing effect. And that's really what a 3D compositor does. It takes two-dimensional images and it composites them in three-dimensional space. Okay, so volumetrics is a limitation that we have to overcome. Composite blur effects. There are no composite blur effects that are available to us as of yet. Now, there is a big project going on that is going to revamp the viewport and give us things like depth of field, blur, at least in a limited manner, and things of that nature. And until that happens, we have to contend with the fact that we do not have any kind of compositing effects such as blur. We have to find a way to get around that. There are ways to get around that. We just have to figure out what those hacks, those limitations and solutions are going to be. Okay, so compositing effects, we don't have any. We have to generate ways to do that. You can sort of see one right here. As I said, from the camera point of view, this planet has kind of an atmospheric effect around it. But if we get in close to it, you can see this is a two-dimensional composite effect. This is actually a plane that is in line with this planet and moves with the planet, and it has kind of this halo-y sort of effect that looks like an atmosphere, and that's, it's a two-dimensional compositing effect within three-dimensional space. So we have to find ways to do that. Next thing, materials. There are material limitations. So first of all, alpha transparency is a big problem. It's a huge problem in OpenGL rendering. OpenGL requires what's called a draw order, meaning that it draws the objects that are in the scene in a specific predetermined order. And in Blender, the way this works is that it draws the objects that were created first in the scene, meaning when the scene was put together, the things that were created first are drawn first. And when it does that, it's drawing the alpha transparency as well. It's accounting for that. So if I have an object that is in the back of the scene and it was created first compared to other objects, it's going to be drawn first. And objects that are in front of that will be drawn second. Now, if I have an object in the back that has alpha transparency, and then an object in the foreground that was created second with alpha transparency, they're not going to mix properly. because that drawing will be out of order. Okay, so that's something we're going to have to contend with. There's issues with refraction. You can't really do refraction in OpenGL GLSL rendering mode and in the viewport, where we have, say, a piece of glass that is refracting images behind it and distorting them. Now, there are ways that we can generate that. We're not doing it in this scene, but we can talk about that in the future. Ways to kind of fake that and generate those kinds of things in the viewport. It can be done. Also, reflections. There are ways to generate reflections inside of the viewport. However, they're not true reflections. They have to be faked. We have to find a way to, some sort of hack, an alternative method to generate the likeness of certain types of reflections, and that's something also that we'll be looking at. So we've identified a kind of a list of limitations here that we will, and by identifying them, we will be able to work around them and come up with solutions. So let me quickly just explain what's happening in the scene. And we're not going to actually generate any of this in this tutorial. This is just an overview. We talked a little bit about what hacking is and how we're going to approach this, but let me just kind of talk about what's in the scene. So we see the star field, and what this is it's actually a number of images, single two-dimensional planes that are set in series, and they have alpha transparency enabled, and they're actually set to a blend mode, an add blend mode. And you can kind of see this alpha transparency problem in action here, that as I rotate my view, you can see once these planes come out of draw order, in that we're looking at them in reverse, the alpha transparency begins to fail. Okay, so you see what I'm talking about. But from the forward view, we can see that these stars appear to be in three-dimensional space, and it's quite a very convincing effect. As if there were actually a bunch of points out there, object-type points like a particle simulation, even though these are just composited two-dimensional images. Okay, so this is a very quick way to get to that. Instead of having hundreds of thousands of objects out there in a particle simulation, we're using two-dimensional images to accomplish the exact same effect. Okay. So you can see this. Now, you can see that a problem that we're going to have is getting things into the proper draw order. As I said, the draw order is determined by the manner in which they are created in the scene and the order in which they're made. We don't want to have to be limited to planning out everything from foreground to background and generating these objects within the scene. So we're going to have to find a hack, a way to change the draw order even after we have already created our objects. And there is a way to do that. There is a bit of a hack that we can use that involves parenting and unparenting to reset the draw order. You can see in here that we have a lens flare in the scene, and it's kind of sitting directly in space in a point. It's a three-dimensional effect. And from the camera point of view, everything sits quite stationary in place and seems to follow the aspect of the camera. And as the camera moves through the scene, you can see that this lens flare is kind of animated in a way that is logical. Now, I put out a lens flare pack recently that some of you may have found on a blend swap. That is an OpenGL powered lens flare pack. This involves elements from that pack. But it is not that same rig, and think of it this way with respect to everything that you see in the scene. If I am driving on a freeway, I might be driving a Camaro. I would not drive a golf cart on the freeway. I would drive a motor vehicle that's meant for the freeway, like a sedan or a sports car. I drive a Camaro, okay? Now, if I'm playing a round of golf, I would not drive a Camaro on the fairway, okay? I drive the Camaro on the freeway. I don't drive it on the fairway. For the fairway, I need a golf cart, okay? So in each place, I have a certain goal of transportation, but I want to use the proper tool for that, okay? Now, I might be able to use my three-dimensional, or rather my lens flare rig for the scene to create the lens flare, but I would have to do it outside of the scene. I don't need to use that, and I don't need to use all the features that come with that rig. I don't need to use a Camaro here. I need to use a golf cart. I can use something much more simple. So a single image plane with my flare on it, set in the background with the proper material settings, gets me a lens flare in this scene. Okay? So what we need to do is kind of jump out of this mentality that we need to generate a three-dimensional atmosphere with all objects and volumetric effects, with smoke simulations and three-dimensional lens flares and perfect, accurate, ray-traced kind of scenarios and situations in order to get this scene. I need to realize that in order to get this scene, I only need the things that I need to get this scene, and I have accomplished my goal. Okay? I don't need a tool that is far overpowered for the job. I need a tool that is appropriately targeted and appropriately powered for the job that I'm trying to do. And that's how we want to think as we're using the Viewport. So we only need to generate the things that are necessary to get our outcome. We don't need to think as if we are using a ray-traced, fully featured render engine, because that's not our goal. We're going to use our artistic ability to generate some of the things that we're looking at in here. Okay, so that's the overview of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking at great length about how to generate the different objects in here and how to set them. And we'll talk about a lot of other things that aren't even covered in this exact scene. Okay, but I just wanted to give you an overview and kind of explain what our goal is going to be and how this is going to move forward. So anyway, I welcome you to the series, and hopefully this was an inspiring start for you. Hopefully it has you thinking a little bit already about some possibilities. And I look forward to the next installment where we will start digging into some of these effects piece by piece and putting together a scene like this, and also learning about some other possibilities. One last request that I want to make actually for the community of followers that's watching this. As I explain ideas and concepts, you may realize that you have a better way of accomplishing something that I propose. That is great, and what I would encourage you to do is that if you have a better way, particularly those of you who use the game engine controls a lot and game engine materials and have a lot of experience with that, if you have a better way of doing something, I encourage you to mention it in the comments section on this channel. And please be descriptive, and perhaps maybe even create a small video of yourself and link to it, so that the community can find better and more efficient ways to accomplish some of these things. I want to invite that kind of a feedback and kind of a community response that is very helpful and encouraging as we go through this process together. So there you have it, the first installment of Hacking the Viewport. And hopefully this is a good start for all of you who are interested in this this sort of rendering mode. And again, my name's Carl Irwin, and I'm glad that we can take this journey together, and I wish all of you a very happy time blending.